Incoming transmission.
The Klingon word of the day is Pak.
These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise.
So, this is a huge victory for the good guys.
Scotty, beam me up.
Resistance is futile.
Live long and prosper.
Boldly go where no man has gone before.
Greetings and welcome to the Computer Resume podcast, the show covering the entire Star Trek franchise in chronological order for fans new and old. I'm your host, writer-comedian, Mr. Todd A. Davis. A former professor with a bachelor's in communications and philosophy and a master in fine arts. He wrote a book and now hosts and produces a podcast of the same title, The Gospel, According to Star Trek. Safe bet this guy's going to make me look like a real dummy more than once. From Fort Worth, Texas, it's Kevin C. Neece! Yay! Kevin C. Neece! Hey, man.
Hi, how are you?
I am well. How about yourself, sir?
I'm doing well. You know, you have some schmancy doors around here that I get to walk through, and then I'm greeted by a Muppet. So like, this is pretty cool.
Listen,
I'm happy.
We roll out the red carpet for our guests, man. This is how we do.
The red carpet, the green felt, whatever. You know, it's all good.
That's it, man. That's it. Oh, gosh, it's
awesome.
It's so great to talk to you. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I got to say, like, when I was first getting this stuff rolling, my show,
right.
You guys were one of the first people I found just because you had, you really had your stuff together and you had a solid listener fan base, and you had a specific angle. You had a specific, niche, because it's easy to just be like, hey, I'm a Star Trek nerd. You're a Star Trek nerd. Let's get together once a week and talk Star Trek.
Right.
That'll fizzle out in about 6 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you guys come at it from this perspective of, analyzing it through a biblical worldview.
Right.
And with the amount of Trek that is already out there and the stuff that's coming out now, I imagine you guys have your hands full.
Yeah, we're pretty busy.
Yeah.
It's a fun time to be doing this, and really our motivation was new Star Trek coming out, because I'd written the first book, which is The Gospel According to Star Trek, the original crew. So it's on the original series, the animated series, then the first 6 films, and the Kelvin Timeline film. So everything with Kirk and company in it. And then there will be a Next Generation book, Deep Space Nine book, Voyager, Enterprise, et cetera, as we go down the line.
It's gonna be so much fun. I can't wait for this. This is great.
Neither could I. And so the idea was, well, there's new Star Trek coming out. It's weird that I'm not engaging with it. And so we were going to be just a Discovery podcast originally. And then that didn't take off, and we couldn't make it work. And then we decided to use the beginning of Lower Decks as the sort of, kick in the pants we needed to start our show. And so that got the ball rolling, and we've just been sticking with it, and just like, well, there's a new episode of Star Trek, so there's got to be a new episode of our show. And we've actually split the show up now, so we have 2 shows. We have our show every week that talks about that week's Star Trek, and then when there aren't 2 episodes of Star Trek that week, which there have been in recent history and wrecked the rest of our schedule, when there aren't, we will also have the topical show, which would have been the back half of the old show, and where we talk about, right now we're going through a series on the Next Generation. So we'll take an episode of the Next Generation. We're kind of going sort of in chronological order. We're in the 2nd season right now. We're working on Measure of a Man. We just recorded our episode of Measure of a Man this week. So
Measure of a Man, such a good episode.
Isn't it though? Yeah, it's really great.
To me, and I mean, I'm a paralegal. That's my 9 to 5. So any sort of courtroom setting, any sort of, like, I don't get me wrong, I love a space dogfight. I love a shootout, with phasers and all that stuff. I love all that stuff, but a really good, spirited, philosophical debate where you can see both sides.
Yes.
I'm all in, man. I'm all in.
You're gonna like it, because that was kind of the thrust, like the inspiration for us on this one was that type of conversation that's going on. We called our episode Crucible of Truth.
Ooh,
So
nice.
you might enjoy that. But
Yeah. Well, I briefly mentioned it and you mentioned it. Your book is awesome. It's really great. And we talked a little bit before we started to roll about it. And I got to say, it's super well written, and which is not a surprise. You're a very smart man. And I imagine the temptation to get preachy with some of that stuff had to be there, but it's not preachy. It's very accessible. It's very accessible is what I'm driving at. The one thing I wanted to ask you is, would it have killed you to put in some pictures, man? Like
it might have cost a lot of money
for us visual
I drew
learners.
them myself. I know, right? That's great. I will say though,
like, because you've got you meticulously cite your sources, which I love. Love that you cite your sources, all of them. Like, did you run into any hurdles in terms of like, hey, can I use this or that, or did you hit any speed bumps in terms of like putting this thing together with specific sources?
No, not at all. I come from the reason that is the way it is that I come through an academic background as a writer. I was not an academic really to any extent until I got into college, and then figured out a purpose for being an academic, which is that my intellectual life and my spiritual life are necessarily intertwined, and that there's not a separation between them, and that learning more and growing in my learning and then growing in my writing and all that was a spiritual process, was a part of making myself a better human being. And my professor, Dr. David Naugle, who was my mentor, about whom I co-edited a book called The Good, the True, the Beautiful. Go check it out. He in honor of, actually, I should say, not really about, but in honor of him. It's very diverse. But he really instilled in me that idea. And so I really got into school at that point. I really got into education. And that's where all those meticulous footnotes come from, is that background. But I've always had a very kind of journalistic, more not quite conversational, but a journalistic style, an accessible style. I try to have an accessible style of writing. And really, you talk about the temptation to be preachy. I think the temptation to be preachy for me would be less that, I'm dealing with this particular subject matter, and just for myself, I feel like I have to preach. Although I tell you, some of the writing that's in the book is, I mean, it's all honesty, that's me preaching. But at the same time, preachy is not the word I'd use to describe it.
Right.
But I think if I had
with a title like The Gospel According to,
right,
a certain amount of preaching. Yes,
exactly. Well, I mean, that's Star Trek preaches anyway, right?
It does.
But I think the temptation for that for me would be more to try to prove myself, right, to people who might be reading this, who come from a more disciplined theological background or whatever, to try to sound like I'm smarter than I am or whatever. But it ended up that the book is just really a very heartfelt expression of myself. Well, and that's
Trek nerds tend to have that character flaw as well, of trying to be the smartest person in the room.
I tell you,
I'll be honest. So to pull the curtain back a little bit for the listeners, we are recording this April 5th, First Contact Day.
Yes.
So happy First Contact Day.
You can't see the Vulcan salute. I'm putting it up, but live long and prosper.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So my wife, I was like, let's throw her a couple softball questions here and see, I was like, hey, so, it's First Contact Day. She was like, oh, cool. And I was like, do you know what state First Contact happened? I think she ran through all the lower 48 and Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico before she got to Montana. And then I was like, you know what? Just for fun, can you tell me the name of the ship? And she guessed every animal under the sun. And I was just kind of like, this maybe isn't fun for her. I thought this was going to be a little fun trivia thing.
Right.
No, not so much.
No, not so much.
Which is why I made her executive producer of this show.
Oh,
so she can say, hey, That's not good. I don't like that. Be like, okay. It makes me sort of qualify like what I'm doing.
Right,
like,
right.
okay, I see where you're going with this, but you're skirting a line here, buddy. Okay, fine.
That's great.
So, getting into your personal history with Star Trek, and you mentioned it a little bit in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have what is that earliest Star Trek memory? Do you have one?
It kind of toggles back and forth, and I recounted it as best I could in the book, but I feel like I saw episodes of the original series like on late night television when I was a little kid.
Black and white or color?
Color.
Nice.
Color.
Okay, cool.
What I watched in black and white was The Next Generation, actually.
Really?
Because yes, because my family, we had two TVs. We had the big main color TV, but then we had a smaller black and white TV in the kitchen. And
sounds familiar.
Yeah. And most of my family did not want to watch Star Trek, when it was on. So I had to watch it and I think it was sometimes during dinner or whatever, but it was in the kitchen, and I was watching Star Trek on a black and white TV most of the time. And then sometimes I got to see it in color. So that's really weird. But I have this.
Well, I was just going to say, it makes me think, because I'm coming at this a lot, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm on a genre film history podcast called CinemaShock. And we talk about, genre film history and the stories behind the stories, basically. But I always love to look at film and television. And one of the things I like to do, just kind of as sort of a mental exercise for me, is how would this look in black and white? And the fact that you watched the original series in color and Next Gen in black and white is super fascinating to me.
Yeah,
I think that is so cool.
I don't think I saw it is kind of cool. If you think about it, I hadn't really thought about it that way. But of course, I don't know if I saw even a whole episode of the original series in those late night TV offerings. It was just kind of there. Maybe my parents flipped past it. I have no idea. I don't know when I really decided that Star Trek was interesting, because I remember thinking it looked a little dorky. I talk in the book, I think, about the little painted wooden blocks that fit loosely into the slots, that are supposed to be data tapes. And I'm like rolling my eyes, but at some point before, Next Generation came out, I started getting really excited about Next Generation. I remember even deriding Star Trek 5 to a friend, like, I don't know why they keep making those movies, when I was younger. And I'm like, I don't know, what kid was that? I have no idea. Oh. And so, but somehow when Next Generation was coming out, I was super excited about it. And there was a Cheerios box that came out at that time. There was Next Generation, that whole series of Next Generation Cheerios boxes, and there was a contest on the back of it. And you could send a thing into the contest and win like this walk-on role on Next Generation. And I wanted that so badly.
Oh man. Oh, that's so
that's
cool.
Probably my earliest real spike of a memory, real peak of a memory, of Star Trek, of being nerdy about it and being a fan. And then that, and walking down the hallways of my middle school. Well, it was junior high. We called it junior high back in my day.
Yeah.
But walking down the halls of my junior high and just imagining myself walking down the corridor of the Enterprise so I could tolerate the day.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah.
That's so great. I can definitely tell you, Next Gen for me.
Yep.
Deanna Troi. I'm one of those guys who I feel the nicest way, and I've always said it this way, Deanna Troi is a decider. It's kind of, hey, young man, how do you feel about this?
Right. I understand.
Oh, okay.
I understand.
All right. Yep. But yeah, so you had this, you really got into school, which that's the big difference between the two
crazy.
Of us. Yeah.
I swear I drove away from my high school planning to never sit in a classroom again. If it hadn't been number one for my wife's granddad providing scholarships for all of his grandkids to go to school, and number two for Dr. Naugle, who taught me what education was for, I would not be here today. That's what it is.
Good teacher really makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yes, he was amazing. He was a beautiful human.
There was, I think back to, I went to school at Bob Jones, and
I'm sorry.
I was wondering if you know that name. My father actually graduated from there with a master's in divinity.
Wow.
And I went there kindergarten through 8th grade, which has not had an effect on me at all. But I don't know if I had, sort of a BS detector, or, just
Right.
was able to see through some of the posturing of most of the teachers there. But there was one teacher, Gil Fremont, who he was an amazing teacher. I paid attention as hard as I could, because he made it interesting. He made, it was history and econ. I had no interest in any of that at all, but the way he presented it was just really interesting. I still didn't do well in his class, but that's because I'm kind of a big dummy. but I had the utmost respect for him. When he said something, I believed him. And I think I didn't have another real good instructor like that until probably my martial arts instructor years later. But yeah, so you had that early memory, and then you had this scholastic blossoming, we'll say.
Yes.
And then this book comes along. So where in there did you experience Star Trek Enterprise for the first time? Did you experience it live? Are you one of the folks who watched it live?
I watched Broken Bow live.
Okay.
And I really didn't stick with the series, because at that time in general, I was starting to fall away in my Star Trek watching. I watched a little, I watched pretty steadily Deep Space Nine through the first season, and I watched little bits of Voyager, but I was getting toward my senior year of high school, and life was getting busy, and I didn't have a DVR, and I couldn't, if I missed an episode, I couldn't get caught up. And I'm very, even though they're episodic, I'm very fastidious about watching things in order. And so I would get behind and I couldn't catch up, and I just dropped it for years. That was kind of like Enterprise was like, well, maybe this will get me back into Star Trek. And then I didn't stay with it, and then it wasn't until I'm going to say 2006 that I really started getting back into Star Trek. So probably about 8 years, I think, I was pretty much not watching Star Trek. And when I got back into it, I was really eager, and I just started watching all kinds of stuff. But then I did this. I always did a paper every year at DBU where I was under Dr. Naugle. He had a thing called the Paideia College Society, where we presented papers every year. And I decided I wanted to do a paper because I was getting back into Star Trek. I just watched Star Trek Nemesis for the first time, and I was like, I want to do a paper on Data, and I want to go back and watch Next Gen and get his arc and write a whole thing on Data. And as I was doing that, I'm going through Next Generation, and then the Abrams movie is going to come out. And so I said, well, I got to get ready for that. So I started watching the original series, started getting like through into the first season of that. Then the Abrams film came out. And during all this time, what's happened is I've had what I call my worldview conversion with Dr. Naugle. And I'm starting to recognize that there's not a separation between, the sacred and that horrible word secular, right? Like that all of life is sacred, that everything is all connected. Right. And that my intellectual pursuits, as I said earlier, are necessarily spiritual pursuits. And so when I see Star Trek, I'm seeing it in a whole new way. And I was like, number one, my paper on Data. And then by the time I got done getting ready for that paper, I knew my whole paper was on the whole of Star Trek, or as much of it as I could write on in one paper. And as soon as I got done with that paper, I knew I had a book. And then when I got into that book, I started watching everything that I had missed. So that's when I'm watching Enterprise, is somewhere in that expanse between 2011 and 2015 or something like that. In there is when I'm watching Enterprise. The only series that my wife has watched with me, the only Star Trek series she has watched with me. She watched the whole thing.
Is Enterprise?
Enterprise. Yeah.
Wow.
Is that crazy?
Yeah. And, kind of.
And yeah, but yeah. So it's fairly recent for me. In that vein, but it's just one of those things that I just thought, well, I got to become an expert on Star Trek, and I love it, so I'm just going to watch all of it, and then that's how the paper turned into a book, and the book turned into a series.
No, that's so great. So for me, I was I was born in '83, December of '83, and so coming up as a kid, Next Gen started in '87. By the time I recall, my parents, when I was born, they were living in an apartment. We didn't move out of that apartment until I was 8 years old, and that's when I distinctly remember watching Next Gen. So that would have been 93. So towards the end, but like it was syndicated, so it was on all the time.
Right.
And I recall watching it, of course, seeing Deanna Troi for the first time. And, but, you know, becoming really fascinated with this thing to a point where I was so comfortable with these characters in this setting that it became one of those white noise shows, or white, you know, you hear people describe movies and certain shows as their white noise show. It's the show that they put on to go to sleep.
Comfort show.
It's a comfort show. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, as my life went on and I got into law enforcement, my first job in law enforcement, I was working third shift. So I would get off work at, 8 a.m. and would come home. When I say come home, my wife and I were living together at that time, and I would come home after she had left for work. We were ships in the night for a long time, but I would get in. We did have a DVR, and I had one day stumbled across, and this was roughly about 2006. I had stumbled across an episode of Enterprise, and I was like, their uniforms have pockets.
Yes.
And the ship is a step above a submarine.
Right.
This is really cool. This is different, and it's really cool, and I like it.
Yep.
So what I would do is when I would get home from work, when I would get home from third shift, I would queue up the DVR of whatever Enterprise episodes had aired on Sci-Fi, the night before. So I had, probably 2 or 3 from the night before. And that was what I would watch to sort of wind down from my work day before I went to sleep. And it's fascinating.
Cool.
So getting into this episode specifically.
Yes.
It deals with, and this was, when I watched this, I was kind of like, oh, I got to choose my guest very specifically. So this, and if you haven't watched Chosen Realm, stop listening, go watch Chosen Realm and come back, because this is fascinating, because it deals with religious zealots. And I know from my own personal spiritual walk, or crawl sometimes, or sit,
Sure.
or hey, I'll get in this wagon, you pull me, whatever.
Right.
When I see things, and I'll go ahead and make the reference here, like Westboro Baptist Church, and things that they have done in the public eye.
Yep.
My initial response to folks when they bring something like that up to me is, that's not all of us.
Right.
They do not speak for all of us, especially folks like my wife, who doesn't come from a religious background. In fact, her relationship with the church is strained at best, because of how the church interacted with her and her family at a very early age. It put a sour taste in her mouth, understandably.
Absolutely.
So right here at the outset, what are your just very cursory thoughts about this episode, and of all the things that they encounter? Let me backtrack for a second. My father always said, when I recall watching one of the rare instances I watched the news with my dad. And of course, something was going on in the Middle East. And I said, Dad, what is this about? Why are they fighting? What's going on? And I don't remember everything he said to me, but one thing he did say has stuck with me, has burned into one of the crevices of my brain.
Yeah.
You'll never win a religious war.
Yeah.
Because both sides don't think they're right. They believe they're right.
Right.
And that can be very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
And I've made the comparison before of the scene in Kevin Smith's Dogma, where the character of Rufus is talking about beliefs versus ideas.
You're saying having beliefs is a bad thing?
I just think it's better to have ideas. I mean, you can change an idea. Changing a belief is trickier. People die for it. People kill for it.
That being said, What are your cursory thoughts about this episode?
Well, I think it's interesting, because you point in a direction that I wrote down on my notes, which is that, this isn't an episode so much about religion, it's an episode about war. Because it is that these people are in this war, and it's rooted in something that is very deep for them, that's very strong for them, and that they're intractable on. And I would not be the first person in the world to say that this reminds me of Let That Be Your Last Battlefield from the original series.
Yeah.
Right. It's very much the same kind of structure, really, in a lot of respects. And yeah, it would be very easy to look at this episode and say, oh, well, this is Star Trek just saying that religion is bad and we should all be atheists. And, it'd be very easy to do that. And I can't speak for Manny Cotto, who wrote the script, whether he would say that or not. I can certainly say Brandon Braga, who co-created this series, would say that for sure, and has said that on multiple occasions. But that doesn't mean that this episode says that. And I think the script goes some distance to make that clear, even if it's a short distance. It does go some distance to make that clear that what is going on here is not an act of faith. It's an act of terrorism that is propped up by religious fanaticism. Yeah. And this isn't about faith. This is about power. And I really like what your dad said, that you'll never win a religious war, because the truth is, if you're fighting in the name of God, even if you vanquish your enemy, you have failed, because you have lost the battle for representing God in this world, because that's not how God functions. Yeah. So I think that's absolutely true and absolutely right. It's true in both that sense of the intractability of each side. Archer says at one point, you fought a war for a century over this one disagreement, right? Yeah. Which we can talk about later, about how that reflects real disagreements in religious circles. But then also that it helps us to see. But then the thing that your dad said also, to me, speaks to no matter who wins, you still lose, because you fought in the name of God. In this, and you killed the children of God in the name of God, no matter who you are. Yeah. So that's,
I think the phrase is give a cup of water in my name, not
practice your right hook off in my name,
practice your right hook in my name.
Right. Exactly.
Double tap in my name.
It's a cup of cold water, not a cup of poison. Just, let's, yes. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And so I like that very much. And I think this episode is a great one to discuss, because it does allow us to pull those things apart, to sort of tease apart those threads and talk about, what is representative of faith in here, what is representative of religion in here, how is religion's relationship to power and to empire, the ways related to the ways in which it distorts faith and therefore pushes people away from God and one another.
Gosh, I couldn't have put it better myself. So I'm so excited to get into this with you, but as we do every week, before we dive in, let's get to this week's recap.
Yes, sir.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
UPN Wednesday, an all-new Star Trek Enterprise.
My faith obligates me to destroy your ship and put your crew to death.
Hijacked.
You're trying to wipe out everyone who doesn't share your beliefs.
All in the name of God.
You wanted to kill someone. Kill me.
Trip and Travis are gathering readings on a third sphere in the Delphic Expanse. Enterprise receives a distress call from a Trianon ship, which reports that they have been damaged by a spatial anomaly.
And so on.
Once aboard, DOGMA, the leader of the group, has dinner with Archer, where he explains that they have been on a year-long pilgrimage to a sphere. They believe deities, called the Makers, constructed the spheres to transform the expanse, their chosen realm, into a paradise.
Roll credits.
DOGMA then rejects T'Pol's scientific logic that there are only 59 known spheres.
Believe it or not, you piece of shit.
Later, DOGMA demands Archer turn over control of the ship or it will be destroyed, and demonstrates this by having one of his followers self-detonate, killing an Enterprise crew member. Having little choice, Archer submits. DOGMA then sets a course for his home world and explains that he intends to use Enterprise to end a religious civil war that has embroiled his planet for a century. Digimon also examines the ship's records and finds that Enterprise had extensive contact with the spheres, a severe violation under his faith. He then erases 19 XB of sphere data and demands that Archer choose one crew member to die. While Archer is contemplating his decision, he approaches Yarrick, Digimon's deputy, questioning his resolve, but Yarrick rebuffs him.
Archer then tells Digimon that he has selected himself to be killed, but requests it be done using a device they use for waste disposal.
That device turns out to be the transporter, which T'Pol uses to beam Archer elsewhere on the ship.
Sneaky, sneaky, sir.
Archer then contacts Doc Phlox, and they develop a means to neutralize the organic explosives using an airborne agent.
And so on.
Archer again confronts Yarrick and convinces him to help disperse the agent throughout the ship, and learns that the religious war is primarily based around a difference of opinion over whether it took 9 or 10 days for the makers to complete their work.
Meanwhile,
4 ships from the heretic Trianon faction intercept Enterprise. During the fight, the crew managed to subdue Digimon and end the battle. In the brig, Digimon remains convinced his actions were justified, so Archer takes him down to their planet. The Trianons are left staring in horror at their completely devastated world, which lies in ruins, having been ravaged by the religious war.
Yeah? Good.
Hate when that happens.
Don't you hate it when that happens? Oh, man.
Sorry.
So we see, a lot of what we've been discussing on the show thus far has been Archer's journey, the path of the arrow, if you will.
Oh, nice.
Thank you. Available for parties, bar mitzvahs, corporate events. But yeah, he's we see him as this very eager, sometimes to a fault, explorer who is, he's helming his daddy's engine, getting out there. Hey, we're humans. We're here.
Right.
And start the party. That's very much how he approached stuff in the first 2 seasons. And, when the Xindi showed up and cut basically a new Grand Canyon in Florida, not that we're going to miss anybody in Florida, but
hey now,
I can say that because I lived there for 3 years. But anyways, with all of that, we see Archer shift very dramatically. He is now more than ever a man on a mission, but now that mission is one of revenge. And we've seen him take some dark steps in that journey of losing parts of his soul. I will say, in that he has taken prisoners and tossed them in airlocks and hit depressurize.
Right.
I mean, he's done some things that are very uncaptain-y. But I feel like him encountering this group, I feel like is a bit of a moral compass reset for Archer. If that makes sense. What are your thoughts now that we're in spoiler territory? What do you got, man?
Well, I would say that's a good observation. I think Archer represents maybe the most naively idealistic captain we've ever had at the beginning of this series. He is just sort of this pure little beam of light, just plucked from the ideal imagination, of whoever's thinking up Starfleet, which actually turns out to be him. But anyway,
I was going to say, at this point, Starfleet could basically take place in a storefront, that's next to a Dollar General and probably a Subway.
Right. But he has that. And you're very right to talk about his shift in the series. And like anybody who has ideals and has a grand vision, and an optimism, right? Who then confronts things that are not in line with that vision, he has to adjust. He has to figure out where he fits. And if that optimism can still survive. And I think Star Trek overall has been doing that a lot, in the past, let's say 25 years of the franchise. That's really been a lot of that going on because culture has gone through this shift where we are so steeped in the Enlightenment, and we think we know everything, and we think we can prove everything with science, and we're going to fix everything because we're so smart. And then postmodernism comes along and smacks us upside the head and teaches us that we don't know everything about the universe. So then we try to figure out where we go from there. And so after the rise of postmodernism, deconstructionism, all that sort of stuff, the cracks start to show in everything. And I think we're particularly at a place right now where we need Star Trek that asks that question: is what we say we hold to be true still true, when the things around us that are supposed to be the custodians of that are falling down on their job and falling apart as we watch? Are we going to fall apart too?
Right. And
that's happening in this episode.
Yeah. And in looking at the reason why these two factions are fighting, it makes me think of, okay, in terms of, a personal life or maybe even a spiritual walk of like, hey, you're doing X. Are you doing X because the Bible says to, or because you think that's how it should go, or because that's what your parents did? Like,
right.
What are your reasons for doing what you're doing? I saw that a lot growing up, and I'm sure you probably had a similar experience where here in South Carolina, it's known that, we've got a church on every corner, basically.
Right. Same in Texas.
The tendency here is there's a big feeling that it's like a big country club, who's dressed the nicest, who has the nicest car, whose family is sitting together, all peaceful, quiet, and picturesque. Like,
right.
I'm pretty sure God came to save sinners and imperfect people. So let's drop the facade, shall we?
Right. No, I mean, you're so right, and that's very much like the way we in Star Trek does this a lot, where they talk about, I always think of my episode that I used in the book as kind of the archetype of how Star Trek deals with religion, is Return of the Archons. And, the idea is that, Landru gave us these great teachings and saved our civilization, and we want to work very hard to save the teachings of Landru. So we've created computer Landru to basically run our whole society, but we've lost the spirit of what Landru was teaching. Yeah. We've lost that entirely, and we've become so systematized that, we've created something that's killing our souls. And we do that with religion a lot. And what you're talking about there is a particular type of performative religion that is very much about how other humans see me, and not really at all about my relationship to the divine.
Yeah.
And that's very important. And I think, again, with this episode, we're dealing with that kind of dichotomy. We have DOGMA, who's all about his quest, right? And seems to really believe that this is what the makers want, seems to really believe. And that's something really important to remember about religious leaders who take us to all kinds of crazy places. There are people who are backstabbing and deceitful and manipulative and know that what they're saying is false, and they're just liars. There are those people, but perhaps more dangerous are the people who are themselves deceived and believe the lies so deeply that they preach it as truth, that they will take, that they will stake their lives on, and they encourage other people to follow them in that. And that's what we've got here with DOGMA, I think.
Yeah, and you actually talked about this in the early parts of your book about the type of religion. I won't say Christianity, because I think it's broader in scope. Religion that Gene Roddenberry railed against.
Yes,
he was against the charlatans. He was against the people who were putting on a show, a facade, or he was against that stuff. He was against how big is your tithe that you're putting in the plate? Make sure everyone hears every little coin that drops in there. Like,
right.
That's not what this is about. Like, and I think part of that goes along with what good sci-fi, not just Star Trek, but really good sci-fi has done for decades is hold a mirror up to us and say, and it's a cautionary tale of like, hey, this stuff has happened. We're kind of telling a story, a parable, if you will, about it. Hey, we should probably learn something from this and open our eyes and, really take a look around. One of the things one of the, I don't get into it much here on the show, but I am a Christian, and one of the things I think one of the greatest things God gave us is free will and our ability to reason, our logic. He gave us logic. You mentioned Spock as a Christ figure quite often. But yeah, he gives us logic, and he gives us the ability to look at a situation and be like, hey, you know what? There's something rotten in Denmark. Like something's amiss here. We've lost the plot. Something's gone awry. And what do we need to do to fix it? And there's that great clip from the newsroom of Jeff Daniels, of course, spouting off a bunch of statistics about, coming back to the main point of America's not the greatest country in the world anymore. Right. But he ends that whole rant with,
first step in solving any problem is recognizing there is one. America is not the greatest country in the world anymore.
Yes.
And, in terms of religion, over the decades, over the centuries, there's been a lot of problems that have not been acknowledged. Those problems did not get smaller.
Yes.
They grew and they multiplied.
And that is very much rooted in what I would call the imperialization of faith. Right. Okay. Where Rome adopts, Christianity as the national religion, and it all kind of goes sideways from there. Not that it hadn't gone sideways before to that point at any point, but once we get this idea that we have to have this religious hierarchy, this religious power structure, religion becomes about power. State and religion are very closely married in their original inception, early in Christian history, right? And they are in other places too. And once that starts to take root, then it becomes very difficult to affect change. Because like you said, you have to be able to admit there's a problem. And when the leadership, when the hierarchy, when the power structure is so thick and so deep, it's very, very hard. It's incremental and slow, the changes that happen. So what's happening now with various pastors stepping away from ministries, various denominations coming under fire for various things, different things crumbling, that is this particular step on a very long road of people working very hard to have their grievances heard. I mean, going back to Martin Luther, he wasn't trying to start his own church. He was trying to transform the Catholic Church and make it and fix some of the problems he saw in it. And when that didn't happen, he went off on his own. And, that's what keeps happening in churches, for good or ill, right? Sometimes it's petty and silly. Sometimes it's over 9 days instead of 10. And sometimes it's over whether or not I can get a divorce. I'm looking at you, Henry VIII. So I don't know if it really, that's probably an oversimplification, but still, that those kinds of things do play into it. And it's very hard to affect change. And this story would be a story that Gene would have loved. He would really have loved this, because this is the kind of harm that he saw in religion that put him off religion generally. He was an irreligious person. I think if he had a religion, it would be humanism. But as I say in the book, he was not an atheist either. I mean, he didn't believe in God as is conceived as a person, right? But certainly believed in the divinity of all of us and in this great divinity of which we're a part. So he definitely had faith or ideas about what comes after this life and what we mean and why we're here and our connection to the divine and all of that. But religion, especially this kind, I think he would really have liked to see this story about these religious terrorists who are brought down, not just a peg, but brought down several pegs, and really shown just how, I mean, again, you let that be your last battlefield. Same sort of thing with racism. It's about power much more than it's about who's white on the right or black on the left. It's much more about that. It's much more these entrenched cultural struggles, to the point that nobody even really thinks much about where they come from anymore. Yeah. And so he would have loved this story, I think. Absolutely. And I would be right there with him. Amening.
Yeah. You mentioned Gene Roddenberry's faith a bit. If you, knowing your background and your knowledge on religion, even aside your personal walk, and we won't even get to your personal walk, but it's clear you have a great knowledge of faith and theology.
I try.
In discussing not to detract, we're going to detract for just a little bit here, but talking about Gene Roddenberry's faith, if you had to assign a position within his own body, let's say an organ, where would you say that he would store his faith? Would you say it would be like in the lungs, or maybe somewhere in this general region? Would he have like faith? Would it be faith of the? Would it be faith of the? I'm not sure. Where
are you leading me to heart, or is this an actual question?
Where do you think he would keep his faith?
Here, I thought this was a real question, and you just trying to get me to say faith of the heart.
There it is, man.
We have an episode called Faith of the Heart. I'm talking about Enterprise on its anniversary. But I was thinking about that seriously though when you were saying that, and I almost said brain. Because I really think
you're absolutely right. And sorry to cut you off here, but I had this thought and I wanted to make sure it got out. I wonder how a journey, a gospel according to examining characters like Tony Stark, who quite literally had a change of his vision, and his, he's the humanist is here, ladies and gentlemen, right. Here he is, the great technological thing. And he ends up, it ends up calling a lot of things that he hadn't considered, but a lot of it, he regains his humanity, I think. And I think it would be an interesting journey. Have you toyed with the idea of doing a similar thing with a different franchise? I know that there are other gospel according to books.
Yeah.
I have one of them actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've got the gospel according to Lost.
Nice.
Yeah, because the wife and I were fans of that show for some reason. But yeah, it's I wonder if someone has considered doing, or if you yourself have considered doing something, not that you need anything else on your plate, but if you had considered any other franchises to examine through the Christian worldview lens.
Absolutely. I have lots of projects, because this was just going to be one book, and now it's a series of books and a podcast, and it was a blog for a long time, and it's kind of taken over my life. But I'm actually, I think about everything, in relationship to a Christian worldview. And, that particularly helps with my son, with being able to talk about things that he sees and help him to engage those things thoughtfully, and think about the ethical implications or whatever he's watching, whatever he's engaging with, the games he's playing.
Yeah.
And so that's been really helpful. But in terms of just like professionally, yeah, definitely. I have a big love for Fred Rogers. He is a huge, I talk about Fred a lot on the show. I try not to do it too much. But he is a big hero of mine.
There's worse people you could talk about.
Yeah, there are a lot worse. And so, yeah, there is actually, I have a contract for a gospel according to Star Trek. I actually have a contract for the gospel according to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So that will come in the future at some point. I wrote what amounts to a master's thesis. It was an independent study project that I wrote getting my master's degree on the history of Jesus films. And so there's a lot of work in that genre that I want to do. And also discussing the films of Martin Scorsese. I'm a big Scorsese fan. Nice. So there's that. And
we might have to have you on CinemaShock too, man.
Yeah. Well, I'm the guy who wrote a paper on Alice Cooper in seminary. So, that's just...
Have you seen him live?
No, I haven't, but I want to.
He came to town a few years ago.
Oh, wow.
It was so awesome, man.
Yep. He's pretty great. He's pretty great.
It was a lot of
Before
fun.
we get off on all our other nerderies, but yeah. So Star Trek is
Star Trek. Yes.
Star Trek is my thing. But at some point I will diversify. Yes. And I have in the past diversified, but actually I have a book coming out this fall on the band. So if you don't, from the 70s, a lot of people they think they don't know the band, but go look them up. You do. And they played with Bob Dylan, and I co-edited a book for which I wrote a chapter. So I do other things.
No, that's cool. That's really cool though. You mentioned the exam. I had in my mind a similar idea for either an examination, be it some sort of long form written something or other, or maybe blog posts or a podcast type thing, examining religious principles presented through film. Just because I'm a big fan of the Book of Eli and Richard Donner's Superman, and that list is extensive. I can't recall all of them off. Bruce Almighty, Evan Almighty.
Yes,
those movies are great.
Yep.
And present some really fantastic ideas. Kevin Smith's Dogma.
Great picture.
Yeah, you can't get away from Dogma.
Absolutely.
In fact, I think CinemaShock actually, before I joined the show as an official co-host, they had a Life of Christ series, and they
nice.
Yeah, it was. I'll shoot you a link to that. Anybody who's interested, cinemashock.net. It's all there.
That's cool.
But yeah, that stuff is really interesting. And I think at one point I was writing a comic book. It was from my perspective, the story of Samson, and seeing, as I started, and I was writing it as an adult, and it was always my favorite Bible story as a kid growing up, because I was like, oh man, he's kind of like a superhero. This is really cool.
That's cool.
As I started to get into it, I was like, oh, he's more like the Punisher. Like, this dude brutally murdered a lot of people.
Yep.
a lot. And when he wasn't murdering, he was pretty much whoring around. Like, that was the other thing he liked to do a lot.
Yeah.
I was like,
heroes of the Bible, kids.
Oh yeah. I was just like, this is not the story that was presented to me in Sunday school.
Right.
But anyways, getting back to this episode, I feel like there is that idea of feeling like an outsider in a world that is thinking less and less about religion. Have you experienced that to any degree? Have you been the other? Have you been in a situation where it's just kind of, where it's more of like, oh, you're a Christian, so I guess we'll just let you do your thing, man.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that at all that you'd like to share?
It is weird because I think I've cultivated over the years a way of expressing my faith that that makes it clear that whatever you have in your head when you think Christian, that's not me. If you, as far as the negative stuff, that tends to predominate a lot of our conversation.
Right.
But I have certainly been in spaces and at times when I felt like I don't have the experiences the people around me have, because I did kind of grow up in the Christian world a little more than I grew up in the world, which I didn't do that to a degree that I was, Amish or something, but I did,
right.
But everybody has their kind of bubble of protection. I feel like mine wore through gradually enough that I wasn't real bruised by it. But I think what's interesting is, as the world more and more, the world around me says, I don't know about religion, I don't feel too good about church, my feeling has more been, yeah, me too. I have spent about the past 20 years of my life trying to figure out how we continue to preserve Christian faith when the institutions of Christianity simply don't do it anymore, or are pushing so many of us away. So I'm right with those people who were like, man, I don't belong in a church. You know, it's hard for me to feel like I belong walking into a church, even though I grew up in them. And so, you know, I had a guy come to my book table once, and I have 2 books. One of them is Spockology, which I put out before the gospel book, and it was a collection of blog posts that we used to have a thing called Spocktober every year on the Undiscovered Country Project, which is what became Gospel According to Star Trek. Yeah. And I collected all those blog posts together, plus some new writing for a tribute to Spock and all this. And this guy was interested in buying that book. And I said, yeah, well, and if you want, you know, I've got this other book over here too. And he said, oh, no. He's like, I'm from whatever state. He said, I don't remember. He says, so I'm surrounded by a lot of these, you know, Christian people. So I hear the word gospel and I just go, blah. And I said, well, I wrote this book for people who, when they hear the word gospel, go, blah. He said, how much for both? So, nice. You know, it was so because it's really true. I did write the book for people who when they hear the word gospel, go, blah, because, you know, I've felt that in my own heart, my own life, that disconnect between, just like the character in this episode. What's his name? It's Jonathan Del Arco, isn't it?
Are you talking about Yarrick?
Yarrick, thank you.
Yeah.
Just like Yarrick in this episode feels like there's this distance, you know, right? Archer asks him, is this the faith that you grew up with? And he was like, well, no. And obviously some of us do grow up with oppressive religion, and some of us do grow up with religion that tells us things that aren't true. But the idea in that scene is this really what the makers want? Is this really the life that your faith has called you to? Yeah. Are you really supposed to be slaughtering other people in the name of the makers? Yeah. And he's able to say, yeah, you know, actually, no, I'm not. That this isn't it. And that's, I think, how a lot of us feel, that our religious structures have abandoned us. So I really related to him in this episode and cheered for him and rooted for him, and felt really bad for Jamat, because I felt like he sincerely believed what he believed, but he had gone very far astray.
Yeah. I think it's vengeance is mine, I will repay.
Yeah.
Says somebody. I can't remember who said that. I read it somewhere. I don't
His name starts with L. It ends with Ord.
Yeah, you know, and talking about that, I distinctly remember, because I mentioned I went to Bob Jones for 9 years. Served a 9-year sentence. I served a 9-year sentence for a crime I'm not sure I committed. But after that is when my mom and dad, you know, homeschooled me for my freshman year, and then took me right to public high school.
Wow.
Big culture shock.
Turn around, bright eyes.
Yeah. And I went in there feeling like the other, because not long before I started going to public high school was the Columbine massacre.
Wow.
And so that's what specifically my mother thought public high school was. Well, he's going to be dodging bullets at every turn, and they're going to if they don't murder him, they'll rape him as soon as he gets in the front door.
Right.
And you know, some of the first people I met at public high school who saw me sitting next to my locker reading my Bible in the morning, and said, hey, you know, we have a Christian club that meets every week. And I was like,
oh, wow.
Really? And they go, yeah, you should come. And I was like, yeah, okay, I will. And I got there, and they were like, it was student led, and they were singing, and, you know, there was someone giving a devotional, and like, this is real. This is a different type of thing than I'm used to seeing. Yeah. I was thinking that I was the other, and I was an other of an other. I was an anomaly of an anomaly. Like, oh, it's not actually supposed to be that oppressive the way I've been raised for my whole life to this point. Like, it can be real. Like, it's a real thing. And I've never forgotten that. And, you know, I think in talking about, you know, they mentioned this podcast brought to you in part by Kevin Smith's Dogma, where they talk about the factioning of the religions. And, you know, it was always very much, hey, we go to this church and this is the church we go to and this is what we believe in. And I was like, oh, but what about so-and-so? They go to the place across town. No, that's a Methodist church. We don't go to a Methodist church. Well, what about over, you know, my other buddy, he goes to this thing. And it's like, no, that's Episcopalians. We don't do that.
Yeah.
Well, what about this one? It's like, no, they handle snakes. That's not a thing we do. Like, okay. I mean, I'm not super down for handling snakes anyway, but like, you know,
right.
And you know, that was a big thing of like, if they're even other under the umbrella of Christianity, if it wasn't Baptist, it was wrong. I was like,
right.
They read the Bible too. Like what version of the Bible are they reading? Like,
right.
That is so different from what I've got in my hand.
Right.
I mean, thoughts on that in terms of like how this all came to be. What do we do, Kevin? Tell me what we're supposed to do, Kevin.
I'll tell you what, one of the great gifts of my life is the diversity of Christian experience to which I've been exposed over my life. So I came up as a very young child in an Assemblies of God church where my aunt was the pastor and my grandmother led the music. And then my family joined a Baptist church. And so I spent most of my time in a Baptist church, but my other grandparents were Methodist. And then through my love of music and my exposure to like Christian bookstores and all of that, I discovered musicians with influences from Catholic tradition, particularly from ancient Celtic tradition, and started learning about all different kinds of things. So even though my religious life was fairly narrow in terms of what I lived, I got voices and influences from a lot of different places. And I think one of the things that I like to say is that we have to learn that culture is not a confrontation, but a conversation. And because we have a tendency, like in this episode, the idea that this whole thing starts from, well, we believe the makers created the spheres in 9 days and they believe the makers created them in 10. And you think, well, that's ridiculous. How can people fight for that long? And I'm sure if Archer had let Yarrick continue, he would have been able to explain why that's such a big deal, right? Because we do have things in our Christian past, like, does the Holy Spirit proceed from the Father or from the Father and the Son? People have killed each other over that, okay? And we look at that now and it's like, okay, is communion a representation? You know, is Christ present spiritually in the communion, or does the wafer turn into flesh and the wine turn into blood? Do we really have to know? Right? Is it really that important? Most Christians today look at that and say, you know, I believe this or I believe that, but I'm not going to fight you over it. And so it's weird how the things that we fight over even have shifted. The reasons we have different factions and different denominations have shifted. But I think more and more, if we recognize, number one, each other's humanity, and number two, the idea that we all kind of want the same thing, right?
Yeah.
That I think we can start to, again, have a conversation and not a confrontation to figure out that we disagree on these things. So maybe it's best to not fight each other over it. Maybe it's best to not fight each other over it. And maybe it's better to try to see what we can do with the things that we do agree on, you know, and make some progress there. And not just within Christian circles, but, you know, between faiths and, you know, people with, you know, no particular faith or what have you. You know, there are lots of things that we have in common and we can focus on those things. And I think more and more as our culture is seeing division, more and more as our culture is seeing people dividing off into warring camps in very active ways, in very vitriolic ways, we can, for the most part, see how toxic and poisonous that is. And there's a lot of people who are working hard to not get dragged into that. And I think that is a holy thing. I think that is a sacred thing.
Yeah.
Because we go through the struggles we go through as humanity. We're always going to go through them. We're always going to go in cycles, you know, but as we learn each time around the loop, I think we have more and more capacity to reach across to other people and say, hey, you're human too. Let's human together.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, like, and I've got a story to go along with this, but like at the core of it is the idea of like, I think one of the best things, and again, I mentioned earlier about, Trekkers having this tendency to try to prove themselves or prove their fandom by sounding like the smartest person in the room. I think one of the best things, most accessible things to say in a conversation, not a confrontation, be it Trek or religion or a lot of things, really, it's to just say, you know what, I don't know.
Yes.
I haven't learned it yet, or you know what, I take it on faith, or but to be human and say, I don't know. And just say, like, you know what, I'm on this journey. I don't have it all together. Those people that I saw in the church as a child who dressed to the nines and did this whole big show of church, it would have come across so much better as just, I don't know. You know what? It's been a rough week. It's been really hard. It's been really hard. And you know what? I don't feel super Christian right now. I got yelled at by my boss. My wife's angry at me. My kids hate me. Like, I just don't have it together, man. It's very humanizing. We talk about this whole thing about being human, and embracing that, and then not only embracing that within ourselves, but embracing that in others. And I think that's where we make those connections. And so anyways,
well, and the thing we say on the show all the time that I know my co-host David would say if he were here, is that the great thing about humanity is that we are created in the image of God, and that every other human being is a bearer of the image of God. And when you recognize that in someone else, then you tend to behave in ways that reflect the image of God within yourself as well. And so that's a big kind of cosmic idea, but it comes down to just treating each other kindly and with respect, and really admitting those things about ourselves. Like you said, I mean, the performative nature of our religious actions is toxic. It's poisonous to us. And the more we let that go, and the more we connect with one another as human beings, because being human is beautiful, the better off we are. Religion has done us this disservice, at least Christian religion particularly has done us this disservice that I can speak to, which is to separate off our humanity from our spirituality, and to say that everything that's human is broken and fallen and bad, and therefore if it's human, it's wrong. Don't follow your heart, because the heart is wicked, deceitful above all things. It's like, but actually we desire things because they are what we are meant to desire, because they will help us to become better humans. We want things that we want, and the desires of our heart, they can lead us to what God has in store for us. And that's a good thing, but so marrying that, rejoining that, I think of the original series episode, The Enemy Within, when Kirk is schismed into these two people, and rather than killing the bad one and keeping the good one, you have to put them both together into one whole person for him to be able to move forward. And we've too often fractured ourselves, not just from one another, but within ourselves. And so when we can bring our whole selves to our church, when we can bring our whole selves to our faith, when we can bring our whole selves, including our faith, out to our nerdrum or wherever we go, into our politics or into our families, wherever we live, when we can live as whole people and know that others, and create an environment for people where they know that they're going to be accepted as their whole selves, that makes all the difference. It makes all the difference.
It really does. Well, I think it's a great place to end the discussion there, but before we end up wrapping things up, let's get to our section that we've lovingly titled, Who Do We Blame? This episode we've mentioned before. This episode was written by Manny Cotto, who his last work on the series was season 3, episode 10, Similitude, which that was a super heavy episode. With the clone of Trip. And them deciding whether or not it should live or die. Oh man.
Star Trek.
My wife came on for that episode, and we had a fantastic discussion about she's a big fan of Jodi Picoult, who wrote the book My Sister's Keeper, which was made into a movie starring Cameron Diaz and all that stuff. But it's basically talking about these siblings that are basically born to supplement organs, blood, whatever the other sibling.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
Surrogate siblings, or I forget the term, but it's
right.
Man, that's some heavy stuff, man.
Yes, it is.
This episode was directed by Roxanne Dawson, aka Lana Torres from Voyager. She's done some really fantastic episodes. I've really sung the praises of Dead Stop after the episode in Enterprise Minefield, which that episode cements Travis Mayweather as my favorite crew member from Enterprise.
Nice.
Yeah, because he a lot of people want to say, hey, Sulu for helm, and I'm like, that's fine. Travis Mayweather manually piloted the NX-01 through a minefield.
Right. He's pretty great.
The defense rests, Your Honor. But anyways,
Kayla Detmer, but still, go ahead.
Right. No, she's great too. The very next episode after Minefield is Dead Stop, where they go to this station that can just magically fix the ship and all this other stuff. And it has
such a good one.
It has some real horror movie vibes. And we didn't really get into this discussion very much, but a lot of Enterprise could easily translate into horror films.
Yes, it could.
Very, very easily. That's a discussion for another day. Anyways,
yes, it is. But it's interesting that Roxanne Dawson on this episode, that Roxanne Dawson is director. I don't know how much say she had in directing it, but she's Catholic. And so nice. If you think about this as a episode that deals with religion, director.
Yeah, the last episode she directed was season 3, episode 6, Exile. And guest stars, I had some trouble finding some info on the guest stars, but the most notable of which is Digimot, played wonderfully by Connor O'Farrell. This is not his first rodeo with the franchise. His last episode that he did was actually back in season 1. It was season 1, episode 18, Rogue Planet, which that was a real fun episode because that's the one where Archer the aliens appear to Archer based on his thoughts and his memories from a poem that his mother read him as a child. We actually took the opportunity to find the poem, and my wife played Archer's mom, and we did an episode where she does the poem and I play some sound effects in the back, and then she says, "Good night, Johnny." And then we did that as a bonus episode. It was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to do more stuff like that in the future.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. I'm really proud of how it turned out too. In 2021, the Digital Fix said that guest actor Colin O'Farrell delivered a very strong performance, which he does. He's very convincing as this terrorist leader. I almost said religious leader. He's not a religious leader. He's a terrorist.
he's a religion appropriating terrorist leader.
Yes.
Yeah. Or religion appropriating terrorist or rat.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
That's terrible. I shouldn't say that.
No, that's so great. Oh, it makes you look at things like the iconography of things like Mouse. Did you ever read Mouse by Art Spiegelman?
I have not read it, but I'm familiar with it. I know it's pretty great. I've read bits of it.
So good. It's so good.
Fantastic.
But yeah, thinking about things like that makes me wonder like how this would look, to have folks like Digimon and his people portrayed as rats because they're a religious appropriating terrorist. I really like that. I like that. But anyways, reviewers and Kevin as well noted this episode's very similar to TOS season 3, episode 15. Let that be your last battlefield. Let that be your last battlefield. Noting the switch of religion for racism. And Herc of Ain't It Cool News gave the episode a 2.5 out of 5. It's a little low in my opinion, but IGN gave this episode a 7 out of 10. That's a little bit better, but final thoughts. But before we get into final thoughts, let me ask you, Kevin, is this episode essential viewing? Is this something that someone watching Star Trek, the franchise as a whole, if they are watching this for the first time, is this one of the episodes that you would include?
I'm not sure. I would say episodes of this type are essential to Star Trek. because one of the things that Gene was most interested in was our relationship to religion and our relationship to God.
Right.
So you have to include those episodes. Whether this is one of those is a judgment call, I think. Certainly let that be your last battlefield is. And since this reflects it in another way, you could say, well, no, because it's doing the same thing twice. Or yeah, because we can have the same conversation about religious conflicts and we can see that it's about more than just racism. So it could go either way for me. I wouldn't consider it. I probably wouldn't consider it in itself to be essential as much as I would consider the pocket of episodes that it lives in to be essential. So if you happen to pull this episode out of that pocket, it would be a good representative.
Right. That's great.
How's that for a good dancing around non-answer?
Yeah, very. I was going to say that's some fancy footwork, sir. I'll say that to kind of echo something that you said, I don't think this is essential to the overall plot, but I think this would be great if you're looking at Jonathan Archer episodes.
True. Yes.
Because like I mentioned at the top of the episode today, we've seen him on sort of this downward spiral of trying to right this wrong that has been done to this place. It's over and done. And he's essentially at a place where he's willing to throw away diplomacy. He's willing to tarnish the galaxy's view of Earth and humanity to write something he can't fix this. He can't fix dead.
Right.
Trip's sister is gone. That sucks. It's terrible. But there's nothing Archer can do about it. There's nothing Starfleet can do about it. And it's, gosh, you don't want to belittle anybody's personal loss. I mean, I feel like we've all been there. We've all lost someone, be it to old age or a disease or an accident or something. It sucks. No matter how it happens, it sucks. But big picture, like you still have the sun will come out tomorrow. What are you gonna do with it?
That's true, but at the same time, it's like I think when people are trying to do things that, like you say, are rectifying a wrong they can't fix, that comes from a very understandable place of helplessness.
Yeah.
I think we all feel helpless before tragic events, and it's understandable to want to do something about it. And I'm not sure if Archer's motives are always pure, or is he's thinking or seeing as clearly as he could be.
Right.
But this episode, I think, very much does cause him to ask questions about that to himself, and might be helping him find his way. I hope it is.
Going back to how Enterprise came into this world, like just after 9/11. I gotta wonder if this story may have been born out of some things that the country was going through at that time.
It definitely, absolutely, specifically was. Yes.
Yeah. And
this whole line of the attack on Florida, all of that was absolutely rooted in that. That was it's all attempting to address that.
I feel like we could talk about this episode at great length for a lot longer than I'm sure either of us actually have.
I'm sure we can.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So any other final thoughts before we move into next week?
Final thoughts on the episode?
Yeah, the episode, Enterprise as a whole, the franchise as a whole, your experience here on the podcast. Any final thoughts that you've got?
Okay,
man?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for bringing me on, because this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
And my pleasure, man.
Appreciate it very much. And thanks for reading my book, because that's something you didn't have to do. And I appreciate that too, very much. And also just, if you're watching Star Trek and you're seeing episodes like this, think carefully about them, because I really believe that for the most part, Star Trek doesn't preach hard against faith, doesn't preach hard against religion that leads to human flourishing. It preaches hard against the abuse of faith and the abuse of religion, which is something Gene Roddenberry railed against, something I will join him in railing against, and something anybody of faith should rail against. So, and try to go forward, as my friend says, not angrily defending the faith, but just quietly going on with it. And and It's a great series. You should see more of it.
Yeah, it's that was one of the things that as we got into this, when I was talking about starting this show with some friends of mine, that I was like, oh, I'm gonna cover the franchise in chronological order, and a couple of them are more savvy than others were like, so you get Enterprise out of the way first. I was like, well, yeah, kind of. But I feel like Enterprise gets a lot of undeserved hate. It's not a perfect show, but like it's
none of them are, by the way. Yeah,
right.
It's really good. I like it a lot. I think if it hadn't been rushed into its conclusion, it could have gone some really great places.
I think
and if they hadn't chosen to put it on CBS instead of keeping syndication, it probably would have gotten the 7 seasons and been able to live out its life like every other Star Trek series. But it just didn't work out.
Yeah, I watching this is something that I've mentioned a few times on the show so far. Being that this show is 20 years old, some of these episodes hit differently today than they did 20 years ago, and it definitely deserves a second look and consideration. So, well, anyways, next week we will be joined by actor and YouTuber Jay Curtis Strickland to discuss Enterprise Season 3, Episode 13, Proving Ground, which is available exclusively on Paramount Plus. Kevin, where can people find your writings and support what you're doing?
Well, you can check out the podcast, the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. We are on most podcast players in the world, or you can go to anchor.fm/GATST. You can find us on Twitter at Gospel Trek Pod, on Instagram at Gospel Trek Pod, Gospel According to Star Trek on Facebook. You can look me up, Kevin C. Neece, Neece. I've got kevincneece.com. It's out there. And you can connect with us in all those ways. Come say hi, come listen, come join us on the journey.
And I am at Mr. Todd A. Davis on all of the socials. From all of us at the Computer Resume podcast, thank you so much for listening. And I'll see you in 10 Forward.
Us on Patreon and like, rate, review, and share on all your favorite platforms. Feel free to send us your subspace transmissions to computerresumepodcast@gmail.com or at Computer Resume on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The Computer Resume podcast was created and produced by Mr. Todd A. Davis. Our logo was designed by Will Martin and Justin Bishop. The opening theme was produced by Justin Bishop, and our outro music was provided with permission by Dronode. Additional music was provided by Mr. Todd A. Davis and Gary Horn, and the voice of Computer Resume podcast and executive producer, me, Kat Davis. # LLAP. We'll see you next time.
Going through a Star Trek. We're doing Star Trek stuff in space. We probably got some phasers and shuttle pods, and we're gonna find a brand new race.
Sorry. Yeah, it's fun because we. I'm sorry. Hang on a sec. There we go. That's for you to edit later because you needed something to edit.
I was gonna say, demons be gone.
Oh dear.
How's that for a slice of fried gold?